Hashtag Ancient America. Hashtag Broken Treaties. Hashtag We Were Already Here. Hashtag Black Codes. Hashtag The Indian Problem. Hashtag Ancient Moorish History. Hashtag More to Know History. From 1774 to 2024 it has been 250 years and counting. Prophet Noble Drew Ali taught us that on September 5, 1774 and on October 26, 1774, a convention was held in Philadelphia. Currently historians called that convention the First Continental Congress. However, the conveners called it the Odd Fellows Convention. Our esteemed Moorish scholar Sheik Azeem Hopkins Bey reports from his great work, What Your History Books Failed to Tell You, I quote, on George Washington's, September 5, 1774, comment stated, if we agree to take the fezzes and the turbans off the Moors' heads and remove the sandals from their feet and enforce it with severe punishments, and to also swear a death oath between ourselves to religiously and faithfully not to allow anyone to teach the Moorish children whom they really were or who their forefathers were, and only allow the Moorish children to be taught that they were truly Negroes, black people, and colored folks, George Washington stated that 250 years ago, being 1774, the Moorish people would not know their nationality nor the name of their forefathers. Also they would not know from which land or ancestors that they are descended from. Hashtag Things That Make You Go Hashtag History Lessons That's Not Taught in School. Hashtag Things That Make You Question Everything. Thinking Face. Related to 1776 to 1976 The Bicentennial Almanac. 200 Years of America. On March 5, 1770, English troops, provoked by boys in front of the Boston Custom House, fired on them and killed 5 persons. The troops had to be moved out of Boston to an island in the harbor, where they remained for 4 years. On that same day of violence, the so-called Boston Massacre, Lord North's suggestion to repeal all the Townshend duties except the one on tea was passed by Parliament, and North soon let the Quartering Act die without being renewed. The North policy brought a period of good relations that were disturbed only by minor irritations. Then, in 1772, at the proposal of Samuel Adams, Boston and other Massachusetts towns set up committees of correspondence to formulate American rights and grievances and to communicate them to other towns in the world. The consequences of the burning near Providence of a British naval vessel, the Gaspee, gave Adams and the committees of correspondence fuel for their proceedings. The ship had harassed the colonists, but the English Commission of Inquiry in its unsuccessful investigation of the Gaspee affair bypassed Rhode Island courts. Concern spread to the Virginia Assembly, which formed its own committee of correspondence and urged all other colonies to do the same in 1773. Such incidents formed the basis for union of the colonists. Meanwhile, Parliament passed the Tea Act of 1773. Its purpose was to help the East India Company to sell more tea in America, at cheaper prices. Colonists reacted negatively, and when the next shipment of London tea arrived in December 1773, a Boston Tea Party was organized to throw it into Boston Harbor. The English reaction was to assert their authority, and under the Boston Port Bill of 1774 no ships could enter the port until the tea was paid for. The colonists were outraged, and their anger was fanned as 3 more bills were passed by Parliament. The Massachusetts Government Act, which altered the Charter of 1691, the Administration of Justice Act, which provided for trial in England of any customs or government officer charged with murder, and, finally, a New Quartering Act. Colonials labeled these the Intolerable Acts. At the same time, the Quebec Act was passed. Intended primarily to give a civil government to Canada, it attached to Canada western lands that were claimed by Virginia, Connecticut, and Massachusetts under their charters, and was interpreted as coercive of colonial interests. General Thomas Gage, Commander-in-Chief of English colonial troops, was sent to Boston to govern Massachusetts. To deal with the emergency, an intercolonial Congress was arranged by the Committees of Correspondence. This First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia on September 5, 1774, and by October 26, 1774 it expressed the colonial position in a number of decisions. The Suffolk Resolves declared resistance to the intolerable acts. Joseph Galloway's moderate plan of a proposed union between Great Britain and the colonies was rejected. An important Declaration of Rights and Resolves was approved. It called for rights of assembly and petition, trial by peers, unlike admiralty courts or trial in England, freedom from a standing army, and the right to choose councils when the power to tax is involved. It was resolved to form an association in each colony to oppose trade and consumption of British goods through non-importation and non-consumption agreements. Finally, it was decided to meet in Philadelphia again in May 1775 unless grievances were redressed. In February 1775, Lord North secures passage of a conciliatory measure. The colonists could tax themselves for costs of common defense. But England generally regards the colonies to be in a state of rebellion. General Gage sends word that the Massachusetts militia are gathering arms and ammunition, and he sends 700 men to Concord on April 18, 1775, on a mission to seize military stores there. Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott ride out to warn the countryside that the British are coming. On April 19, 1775, the British kill 8 Minutemen at Lexington. Militiamen fire on the British troops on their way back to Boston. The city is brought under a siege by a force that grew to 16,000 militiamen. American assemblies begin to arm for a general war. By the time the Second Continental Congress gathers at Philadelphia on May 10, 1775, the delegates are committed to common action. They turn to problems of defense and create a Continental Army of 20,000 troops, with George Washington the unanimous choice for commander-in-chief. Each colony is urged to establish supplementary committees of safety. The Congress continues to petition the king to redress colonial grievances. On July 5, 1775, Congress adopts the Olive Branch Petition, written by John Dickinson, beseeching George II to end hostilities. The next day they adopt a declaration of the causes and necessities of taking up arms, by Dickinson and Thomas Jefferson, which does not demand independence, but claims that the colony's cause is just and their union perfect. It expresses their resolve to die freemen rather than slaves. This Congress sets the course of military action. Already, at Boston, on June 17, 1775, the British have won a hard-fought battle at Breed's Hill, later called Bunker Hill. It was a battle that showed how well the colonials could fight. In September, Congress sets up a committee to plan naval operations as well. On November 9, 1775, Congress learns that George III has refused the Olive Branch Petition and is sending 20,000 troops instead. There is no turning back. As the year 1775 draws to a close, the American colonies are in a state of active rebellion. The colonies have finally formed a confederation. Their delegates, meeting in Philadelphia as the Second Continental Congress, continue to deny any intention of separating from the English connection, although their expressions of loyalty to George Ely lack conviction. While offering their olive branch petition, they are busy organizing a defense of their liberties on the field of battle. They have chosen General George Washington to lead their armed forces, and he has taken command in the field, where the colonials are besieging Boston. Elsewhere, Colonel Ethan Allen has captured Fort Ticonderoga, General Richard Montgomery has taken Montreal and joined forces with Colonel Benedict Arnold, who has completed an arduous march through the Maine wilderness to the plain before Quebec. Throughout the colonies, sides are being taken and British intransigence is breeding American Revolution. The editor of Pennsylvania Magazine, Thomas Paine, is preparing for publication early in 1776 a pamphlet, Common Sense, to persuade the hesitant. Everything that is right or reasonable pleads for separation. Our present numbers are sufficient to repel the force of all the world. How has it happened that the far-flung, disunited, hitherto incompatible settlers in America, who came to these shores for a variety of reasons and who still cherish the traditions of their English homeland, have reached this mood of no return? Even a Franklin or Jefferson could not have foretold this climax to a history of a century and a half of settlement, this unanticipated birth of a new nation. #Psalm 3 #Confederacy #Komian Latuska Themoff from being Ganation #Things that make you think and question everything. #Paper Genocide #Landgrab #Landback.
These are people also who were already civilized. They already had complex architecture skills. They had a written language, Phoenician. That's where phonics comes from. This is everything, like all of the languages are connected to Phoenician. And this is also why I wouldn't tell anyone who speaks English, who has an English name, that you have a slave name, right? Because English is connected to Phoenician. All of these languages are. It's almost like a root language. All right. So you have a seafaring culture that had several colonies in different parts of the world. Hano Bay. All right. And it says, by this I take claim. This was found in Cape Cod. I think that's Cape Cod Bay. Cape Cod Bay, Massachusetts. No reason anything like this should be found here. They're saying the stone dates back to 250 BC. But from our perspective, that's a legal document. It's a marker stone. This is proof our ancestors were here. This is proof that our prophet was right. There's no reason the Phoenician script, you shouldn't even have characters carved into stone in a script that most people can't understand. Only a handful of people can read. This is a dead language, right? You don't have people just walking around that can write in this script. So even for someone to be able to fake it, there's going to be mistakes because, when people found these types of artifacts, including this one and the one in Brazil, people didn't even understand it at the time, right? So we're able to trace ourselves back. This is why, for the brother who asked the question earlier, saying, why are you trying to say that this is Morocco? This is why we're saying it. We have proof carved in stone. Not only just talking about you had the indigenous people here wearing fezzes and turbans. You had the Peru nobility wearing the yantu, which is a crimson wool headdress with the tassel. Right? Remember, y'all go to MoorishFez.com. We got that for you. Crimson wool with the tassel. So not just saying it because that's what the people was wearing here, the fezzes and the turbans, the royal headdress. No, we have actual physical records. We have the physical records. And yeah, Phoenix is connected to Phoenicians. Phoenix, the rebirth, the Phoenix, the phonics, just language in general, right? But this is why we can make that claim for real. But it's known. It's known. We even have within the congressional records, okay? Like this example that's up here on the screen. This is in Congress. Strange to say, the presiding officer decided in favor of the latter. They're speaking about the history of the word America, where it came from. But even though the theory rejected at this Congress has not much historical support, we may confidently look to the Incas for a better one. Right? They're trying to say America, where did it come from? They know it didn't come from Amerigo Vespucci. That was a lie they told us in school. I hope they're not still telling that lie. But it says, we may confidently look to the Incas for a better one. America was spelled variously in the first maps and documents as Amaraca, Amerioka, Maraca, Moraca, as well as America. From Humboldt, we learned that the first settlement of Spaniards on the mainland was a Maraca Pana. The native word Pana was, according to Sir Walter Raleigh, the equivalent of country. Okay? So he said, it says Herrera says that finally he arrived at a port where they saw a village on the shore called Maracaibo by the natives. So the indigenous people here, referring to the land as a whole as Maracaibo, Amaraca, Pana, Moraca, Maraca, Amaraca. What does that sound like to you? Amaraca, Moraca. This is Morocco. Not saying that that's not Morocco, just saying you going back thousands of years, it was understood by the people who lived here that this is Maraca, variations of it. Why? Because you have people living in different parts of the country. They had their own language. They had their own way of pronouncing it.